Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Corpse Grinder cult from Necromunda Dark Uprising. And so this model is the, the big central guy anyway. He's the guy with the spiky bits on his head. He has been assembled, left off his base, and primed in Grey Seer, the spray prime from Citadel. And we're going to start off by applying the Apothecary White contrast paint over all the areas that we are going to paint white, or the cloth bits, his gloves and his helmet. Basically, we're just going to paint everything that's kind of white in this fashion. So it's already been given this prime, and with the Apothecary White, we're applying it fairly generously over the areas, the face mask, the gloves, as well as the pants. And as we go around the model, eventually I will end up applying it over the armor as well. Just kind of see where things are going. Now, the vibe that I'm kind of going for with this model is kind of like 30k World Eaters, that kind of vibe. Now, I realize these guys are kind of a corn cult, as their background would suggest. Oh, we also applied on the little loincloth dangling from between his legs kind of thing. These guys are kind of a corn vibe, but I am going with these lighter colors because as we work our way through, it will become more apparent why I'm going with this lighter tone. Mechanicus Standard Grey with some contrast medium. We're going to basically turn Mechanicum Standard Grey into a contrast paint by simply using the medium. I take a little dollop of the paint and mix a large amount of the contrast medium into that, just tiny little amount, and basically because I want to have a slightly deeper tone with this, as I want to go for kind of a white, but really more of a darker gray. So that's why I'm going with this contrast, or this Mechanicus Grey and contrast blend here, and I basically apply it over the entirety of the model in the same fashion as I had done with the Apothecary. You pretty much could have started off with this fashion, but I found with the Apothecary it does maintain a bit of the bluish tone that the Apothecary White has in it. So it's a bit more like if you took, I guess, Celestra Grace and broke it down. Here you can see I'm applying it pretty much to the entirety of the lower bits, the armor, as well as on the thighs and on the boots as well. Pretty much only leaving just the weapons and the flesh areas untouched with this color. Oh, and the tips of the boots, because, that really doesn't matter. But again, with this color here, I'm simply just applying it because I wanted a slightly deeper tone, but with the Apothecary White in there, it was fine. With the mix ratio and what I went with, it's pretty much just falling within the recesses, creating a bit of line work. Celestra Grace is next. Just a little bit of dampness of the brush to thin the color out ever so slightly, and basically we're going to begin edging the highlights onto the model, going for basically the high points on the folds of the cloth, concentrating more of the color towards the high points on the loincloth here. I bring actually the highlights down towards the bottom. Basically it's just more of an aesthetic choice, really. I really just kind of go for the big broad points and bring the highlights downwards on the cloth, whereas for example here on the leg I simply go for the high points. On his buttocks, basically it's more of kind of the central area and also catching that fold that kind of runs across the two, but otherwise going for just the high points on folds, allowing most of that base color to remain pretty much unmolested. With the face mask, basically it's just the high points, again with the face done in a typical fashion, which I do faces where I just do the top of the brow, catch the top of the nose, forehead, as well as the little spiky bits that come out. I don't really do the armor on the horns coming off, as I'm not 100% sure that the armor is going to stay with this kind of lighter gray. I just kind of laid that out just so I could see a bit more of the details. Here on the gloves, I'm concentrating mostly on the knuckles, the fingers, as well as the high points, and the band that where the glove kind of meets the flesh. More highlight is brought to that point, kind of just illustrating that. I don't do any really the underside of that. Again, as I'm working my way around, I'm really kind of finding myself really kind of, taking my time with this and, spending a little bit more time with this than I normally would, especially when I'm trying to get these guys done for upcoming games. Oathbrand Grey is next, and this is to finish off the highlight. Again, as I was going with a lighter white, kind of light gray kind of look, I'm going to only bring it up to about this Oathbrand Grey. Again, with these highlights, it's really just kind of bringing it towards the ends of the knees, the knuckles on the gloves, as well as just tiny little highlights here and there. Again, as you work finer and finer highlights, you are using less and less paint as you work your way around, but otherwise, it's just building those highlights and working edges, creating smaller and smaller gradients, and that's really the big part, especially if you're doing, if you're going to use this for painting white on a miniature. This technique works pretty much the same way, except you probably would go with white instead of Oathbrand Grey. You push that contrast really far, but here I'm kind of going with just the darker gray tones. Again, it's just really kind of what I want to do here. You can see just very, very minimal highlights. Again, onto the buttocks, it's just really, really minimal. Again, kind of using this dashing kind of highlight kind of technique, again, just to kind of simulate the cloth, but otherwise it is just the high points. Really kind of straightforward, nothing terribly fancy here. This is just kind of a light gray with a bit more contrast than normal, but otherwise this works for white as well, again. But that is it. That's as easy as that. Next, we'll work on the flesh. I want to thank all my patrons, as without their support, a lot of these videos would not be possible. And if you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. And then a huge thank you, and stay tuned for more fresh tips.